Hi everyone, it's Janet and welcome to my channel. I've got some fun things to share with you. I'm going to be starting a series, but it's going to be using these new watercolor journal die sets that have come out recently from Art Impressions. Bonnie is demonstrating how to use the watercolor stamps and the watercolor techniques, but this one is going to be using Copic markers predominantly. So you'll get to see another way to use this set with your existing stamp and watercolor stamps, but still use the Copics with them. So if you're not a watercolorist, this is going to be more up your alley. The measurements on this journal is about 1 1/8 inch thick. It's 3.5 inches wide, and it is 4.5 inches tall. So it's a nice size, and there's lots of room in here for dimensional decorating, which I really love about it. And it's just a fun little design, plus all these dies that come in the journal are really great to work with. There are 6 pages in here, and I just want to say as we get going with this, I'm going to be doing a whole series. We'll do a page or 2 at a time each week, and we'll finish it all up. It will have a Christmas theme, and you can just come back to my channel and make sure that you're signed up by clicking on my bell, and that way you'll get a notice when I put out a new one. So I hope you'll follow along with this and do it with me. So let's take a look at the dies. There is just a ton of dies in the main set for the journal. This die cuts out the front and back covers, and then there's another die that cuts out the individual pages. There's also a frame with 4 openings in it, which is pretty cool. There are some tags, a circle, a button, and a scalloped circle. And then there's another kind of mat for you to cut out that will fit the pages, another mat there that has more or less a scalloped edge, a really cool frame. Then there's a corner piece, another tag, a flag, a miniature envelope and a pretty little bow to go with it, an easel. There is a gift card holder and pieces that you can use to decorate the front of the gift card holder or elsewhere in it. That's a banner for sentiments. We've got 3 different borders. These are 2 scallop borders, a simple one and a simple lace type. And then we've got a much fancier lacy border over here. And then there are 2 scroll shapes which can be cut and used for decorating your journal as well. So there's one that's a little smaller than this one, which is bigger. And there's a little piece that can be used with those scrolls or anywhere as well. It's like 3 little leaves that you can use. So overall, it's just a fantastic little set and everything you need to go to town and make a great journal, no matter what the theme. Now, this extra set includes a strap, the clasp, and some additional decorating pieces, which are locks and keys. It's so cute. So this is the strap, and then this makes up the clasp. And then there are, like I said, these keys and so on that you can use to dangle off your journal or use it inside the journal. I'm going to try to use as many of those as I can. There's a whole series of watercolor stamps that have come out with this journal, and they're all Christmas based. So I'm going to show you 3 of the sets that I'm going to definitely use. This is Santa and Workshop set. It has an absolutely precious little Santa on here, and there's also a workshop. I think that one has a lot of flexibility. It could be a bakery, it could be a coffee shop, it could be a workshop, it could be many different things with a Christmas theme. The next one that I have is called Mailbox Birdhouse Set. It has the birdhouse and also a mailbox on it. It's also very cute, and we'll be able to use that. And then finally, I've got for the cover, Christmas Snowman Set. This has a standing snowman, but also a snowman next to a sleigh full of gifts, and it is so cute. Now, like I said, these are all watercolor stamps technically, but I'm going to use them with Copics. And really with all of the, or most of the watercolor stamps, you can use Copics with them, and I'll just show you that. Now, there's also one huge sentiment set that has come out. It's got all of these greetings. There are both a few verse type and a lot of single line greetings that are on mostly the smallish side, which will work great in this journal and on your cards too. So let's look at the other sets I'm planning to use. The first one is Snow Friend set. It's got all kinds of cute snowman images as well as a birdhouse that will be fun to use, I believe. And then we've got Christmas bee set, super cute with all these bee images. And then this is HM or Holiday Mansion accessory set. There are lots of little icons that are perfect size for this journal, and I think we will be able to use quite a few of those images. I have the gingerbread cubbies, and this is just right to fit on a page. It's just the right height, so I think I'll be using those, but for sure, if not that, the little gingerbreads. And then there's Christmas mice set, another set of really cute little images. And finally, I have a Windows on the World snowy window set. I thought it would be interesting to maybe attempt to use that in this journal as well. So probably I'll be bringing in some other things as well, but at least for now, that's what I'm planning. Now I've got some double stitched dies. We have the oval, and then there is the rectangle, the square, and finally there's a circle. And all of these, of course, are available from Art Impressions. So you may also have some stamps you would like to use in your journal if you're going to follow along with me, and you're certainly welcome to do that. If you're interested in some of these products that I've shown you, I will have links for you in the video description. You can just click on those and go directly to each product, so it will be easy to order them. So we're at the point in this video where I'm going to show you how to make the journal itself. And the paper that I've picked is from Graphic 45. It's called Christmas Magic. This is an older set and it's really not being produced anymore. But I would just recommend you go into your own stash and look around. What I found is that you can either use a 12 by 12 or an 8 by 8 piece of paper. So it happens to be that this right one here is 8 by 8 and it'll fit exactly across it. By it, I mean the die that makes the journal front and back covers. So that's what I'm going to do. I thought I might need this 12 by 12 pack, but it turns out that I really don't. So unless I decide I want a pattern from this 12 by 12 pack, I'm going to concentrate on just using the 8 by 8. So I've picked some paper that I want to use for the journal cover, both the front and the back. So what I need to do is cut 2 of these. And I'm just going to hang the edge of the die over the edge of one side of the paper. And I chose to pick the side that has a straight corner to hang over. Where the rounded corner is, I want to make sure that I hit the paper well with that corner round, and so that's why I chose to just hang it slightly off or just right up to the left side here where we have that, again, square corner. So I'm going to take this 8 by 8 page and I'm going to cut it, and I need to cut it so that I can fit it in my Sizzix Big Shot, because the 8 by 8 itself is unfortunately too large to go through there. If you would have a Gemini, the large size, you could of course put the whole sheet through. So if you have that, you wouldn't have to cut it. It's always a good idea, I think, to use some sticky tape of some sort, like a washi tape, for example, to make sure your die doesn't move around on you, but especially in this case if you're using 8 by 8, because it could move around and not cut completely where you want it to. So I found that by using a bit of tape, it would cut exactly right. And as you can see, I'm just using my Teflon tool to burnish in those score lines that are included in the die. I just recently got this order of yellow tape from Spellbinders. It's called the Best Ever Craft Tape. And I'm so far finding that it does work really well. It sticks nicely, but doesn't tear your paper. So now you can see I have cut 2 of these, and what I did was make sure that on one of them the corner was rounded on the left, and on another one the corner is rounded on the right side, so that when we put these together you end up with a rounded corner on each side. So just pay attention to that if you want. It wouldn't have to be that way, but if you're going to use pattern paper and you have a right side versus an upside down side, you'll want to pay attention to that when you're cutting it, or you might get one side that's right side up and the other that will be upside down. And so I did notice that when I was cutting that and made sure that it didn't happen to me. Actually, once in a while I will catch those things. All right, so we're putting this together with just a little bit of glue to hold the 2 pieces together, and this then creates the outside binder of the journal. It's really quite clever and very easy to do. So the next thing I'm going to do is work on the pages. Now it takes 6 pages in the book. You wouldn't have to put all 6, but that's what it fits, so I'm going to be demonstrating it that way. Going back to my papers, I will just test this piece that was left over from the journal covers, and they definitely are not quite wide enough, unfortunately. But all this paper is stuff that I've used over the last 2 Christmas seasons, and so I will use it in the journal here and there, I'm quite sure. They're good sized pieces, just not for the pages. So I'm just going to scan through this paper pack, looking at both sides, trying to figure out what I want to use, and I will pull 3 pages. Now, I did choose something that was double-sided. I think that the double-sided paper works really well for something like this because then each page is a little different and it has lots of color and movement going on with the patterned paper. You could use plain cardstock in it as well and then just decorate with patterned paper. Really depends on what you prefer and how much paper you have available to work with, really. So I'm going to page through here. I've picked 2 of the papers now, and then I'm going to go ahead and pick this last one. And all 3 of these papers are going to have a, right side up kind of deal. So this one, for example, it has writing on it, so I don't want to put it in so that the writing would be upside down when I insert my pages. So I'm going to start by cutting this first piece. I'm going to lay this die out so that it's nice and straight, and then I'm going to secure it with some of this Best Ever craft tape. And then I'm going to bring my cutter back in and trim it down because once again, it is an 8x8 piece and that's too wide for my big shot. So I realized I probably need to peel back that tape just a little bit when I cut because otherwise I would be cutting the washi tape off. But there we go. So this paper needs to be about 3 3/4 wide to accept the die. The die page itself is 3.5 inches though. So that gives you an idea of how wide you need to cut your paper. So on an 8x8 page, cut 3 3/4 wide, I will get 2 pages for the journal out of that piece. So ironically, for some reason, based on the placement that I used on my cutting mats, I didn't quite cut through on the top of this die. And I'm realizing that as I'm trying to take it apart. It truly had something to do with maybe I had the edge too far over, or it overhung somehow the side of my cutting plate just enough so that it wouldn't cut. So I did leave this in here. I thought it would be good to show you how I fixed it. As you can probably guess, I just took my finger blade and ran it along the score line because I did get a score line, it just didn't quite cut through. Now I don't want you to think that the dies don't cut well, they do. Of all the pages I made, which I made 12 between the sample I first showed you and the one that I'm putting together now, this only happened once. So it truly was something with how I placed this die and the paper on my big shot. But nonetheless, it was easy to fix. And this is going to go in just like that on the left side. So now I'm going to cut the second one. And because this is going to be on the right side with the binder facing a different direction, or the fold facing a different direction, I just need to make sure that again I'm keeping my pattern so that it is the right side up and not upside down. So if I would cut it the same way as I did the other page, I would end up with an upside down page. So all you have to do is switch it so that one side is folded on the left and the other time you cut it, the fold is on the right. And I've cut all 6 pages and you can see what I mean here. So I've got 3 pages with the fold on the left side and 3 pages with the fold on the right side. Now there are a couple ways you can put these pages into the book. This is the first way I'm going to show you, and it's using double-sided tear tape. Real easy. This is a 1/4 inch tape. It fits perfectly. And then once I have that on the folded part of the page, I'm going to go ahead and peel off the backing. Then once I finally get the backing removed, I'm going to line that edge up with the edge of the score line toward the front of the book. So it's the first score line on the left side. And I want to line this up so that the top and bottom are perfect and not overhanging. And then once I felt that was right, I could press it down and it is in the book. That is not coming out. No way, no how. Now that works really well, but I actually prefer to use wet glue. So you're going to see me using wet glue for the rest of the pages. My preferred glue is Art Glitter Glue, but lots of people love Barely Art Glue. I don't have any experience with Barely Art Glue, but I would imagine it probably is very similar to Art Glitter Glue. I can only tell you that the Art Glitter Glue definitely will hold a page like this, and you can load it up with some weight and it's going to hold just fine. So I prefer to have the ability to wiggle the page around a little bit before it sets to make sure that it is absolutely correctly placed. I'm always a little afraid of the double-sided tape because though it sticks really well, once it's stuck, you can't unstick it. So if you don't get it right the first time, it could ruin your project. And so I've just done that enough that I'm like a little shy of the double-sided foam tape. Anyway, that's just my story. You may have a very different one and love double-sided tape. Just use whatever you're most comfortable with. Okay, so the left side is in. Now we're going to put the other 3 pages in the very same way, except that because the fold line is on now the right side instead of the left, we're going to line up the first page to the first score line on the right side. And because we paid attention to how it is cut, all of the pattern pieces will be right side up in the book. I just want to, really caution you to pay attention to that, because I would hate for you to lose and waste some paper because you didn't notice that. Now, if it happens to you, don't throw it out, because you can use the paper that's left without the seam in it. You can use it for other pieces in the journal. You can use it for corner pieces, accent pieces, borders, whatever. So don't throw it away if that happens to you. If you like that paper, you can definitely use it somewhere in this book, I guarantee you. Okay, so I've gotten 2 of the pages in pretty quickly, and I'm just checking, when I look at the front of it, that I don't have an overhang of paper. It is so precisely the same size as the book binding or the journal binding that I want to make sure it fits correctly. And we're just pressing that in, and pretty quickly we have all 6 of these pages in. And it's kind of pretty all by itself, right? You could just add some pictures in here, a little bit of artwork, a journaling page, and you'd have a completed book, really. But we're going to decorate it up with lots of stamped and colored images just to make it even more festive. At this point you could set up the clasp, but I'm not going to do that right now. These are the 2 pieces we're going to eventually use, but I'm going to work on the cover art for this little journal. I'm not going to put in the clasp just yet because I want to get the artwork on the front, and then I can see where to place the clasp so that it doesn't interfere with that image. So to start with, I'm going to use the new Watercolor Journal stamp set called Christmas Snowman Set. It's number 5571, and I'm going to use Hero Arts Contour ink. It's a very light gray, and what contour ink allows you to do in this case is basically achieve no line coloring with your Copics. And that may seem a little intimidating, but don't let it be, because actually it's a little more forgiving than having just stark black ink. So if you go out of the lines a little bit, you really can't see it, and that's a good thing when you're Copic coloring. So I'm going to start by using C1 to put in a little shading around the face and the hat, and then CO to blend that out. And then again, C1 underneath areas that are going to have shades. So underneath his vest, and then where there's little divots in the stamp that indicates there is a form there, I'm going to bring in some gray. Then I'll take the C0 and blend that out. These are very, very light, cool gray colors, and it looks a lot darker than it actually is going to be when it dries. So just be aware of that too. It isn't going to be quite this bold after you give it a minute or two. Now, the face I did think got a little dark, so I decided to bring in COO to go over that area to try to lighten it up a little bit. Okay, so this looks really awful right now, but don't worry about it. As we color the rest of it, it's going to not stand out so much. It's going to blend in and be actually quite light. So I'm going to work on the hat first, and this is BV13. I'm doing a little bit of outlining and then flicking on both the crown and the brim. As you can see, I'm leaving quite a bit of white space there at this point. The next color is the BV02, and I'm just going to blend that all the way toward the middle. As often is the case, I'm going to bring in the dark color again and do kind of what I did the first time, just some outlining and some flicking. That's going to give the hat a little more definition and some more color back that was lost when I used the lighter color, and that just kind of bleached it out. So I needed to add all of that back in. But doing it that way makes a great blend. Next, I'm going to work on the scarf. I'm using R24. I will outline again and put in some darker color where there would be shadow. I'm putting in some flicks to kind of mimic fabric and the folds of fabric. And then I'm going to bring in another color, R22, which is a little bit lighter. And then I'm going to come back again with the R24. Just like with the hat, I'm going to put the lines back in and add an additional shading again. And this will give some depth to that scarf. All right, so then I'm going to be working on his vest. And this vest is also pretty simple. I'm going to use two colors again, BV13 and BV02, outlining and then putting in shadow. So the shadow will go where you would see just a little bit of darkness. On the edges of the body is always a place you're going to see some shadowing, as well as right around any objects that are in front of the vest. So that's the scarf in this case. And then I'm going to fill it in with the BV02 again and come back with the BV13, again putting in the lines, some of the shading, and this time it's going to blend in really nicely without it being too harsh. Now I'm going to be working on the nose. That is just a simple coloring of YR07. I'm going to use a twin tone marker in chocolate, and I'm going to use that fine tip on the twin tone just to go over the arms. These are twig arms, and the twin tones work great because they're very, very fine, and I can get a nice fine line. So I'm choosing to use that instead of a Copic marker. At my skill level, at least, I could not get this fine and crisp of a line using a Copic marker. Then I'm going to bring in a navy twin tone marker, and I used that on the face. So I drew the smile and the eyes of that snowman. So the next thing is to work on the little bird. I'm going to make it a robin, so I'm using again the R24 and the R22 to create the robin redbreast and also his tail feathers. I used YR07 again for the bird beak. That was the same as I used on the nose of the snowman. And then I'm bringing in E53, which is a very light beigey brown for the body of the bird. I do need to draw some details back in again, so I've used the chocolate twin tone to draw everything back in so I've not lost that detail. And now you can see too, now that my gray has dried, it's very light. It doesn't look at all like it did at first, right? It looks pretty good. So I'm using my C7 marker for the buttons of the snowman. And most of the coloring here is now done. All I need to do is add some white highlights back into this. And for that, I'm going to use Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White ink. I have trouble saying that for some reason. I have to say it slow. So anyway, I'm going to use a very fine brush. This, I believe, is a #1 brush, and I'm just going to put in some white highlights for the hat, for the scarf, and I'm going to add a bunch of little dots on the hat And then I'm going to start adding dots into the vest. At first I thought maybe I'd just put a few dots, but then I decided, you know, it'd be fun just to have it be a polka dot type vest. So I just added a whole bunch of little white dots in there, and I think it really looked great. I love how it turned out. So now that it's done, I need to fussy cut it out because I'm going to mount it onto an oval piece. So I'm just going to use my craft scissors here and just fussy cut my snowman. There are no dies for these watercolor sets. Typically there are not. And so the good news is it's pretty easy to cut around. And so I kind of sped up there to show you how I did it, but not spending a lot of time. So I'm using the 4th largest die to cut a piece of white cardstock. I'm going to use Copic friendly marker paper again, and I like Express It papers. It just seems to blend the easiest for me. Lots of colorists recommend it, and I'd have to agree that it works pretty well. And the reason that I'm going to use Copic paper is because I'm going to create a faux watercolor background. It's going to look similar to how Bonnie's watercolor backgrounds, although I'm sure not nearly as good. She is amazing. But in any case, I'm going to use some of these inks, B000 and B00. I'm just taking the darker B00 and kind of squiggling it around to see if I like the placement of that, and I did. And then I'm going to use the B00 and just use it to blend out the edges. Then I'm going to take the Zero colorless blender and I'm going to work on the edges of this remaining blue color to try to further feather out the edges. And by doing this, you create what looks much like a soft sky background using watercolors. So I'm going to let that dry while I work on getting my snowman set to go on that little oval. And by the way, I did use the double stitched ovals from the AI store for that. I had a little bit of tape overhanging there at the top of the snowman, so I trimmed it, and then I used a little bit of glue to attach it to where the bird is. I guess I had touched it a little too much, so it lost some of the stickiness, so therefore I did need to use a little glue. But it worked out. And this is going to go on a larger oval cut from the same double stitch dies, but it is the 3rd largest die rather than the 4th. And then I can just apply my snowman right there. Now in Bonnie's version of this, she put in a tree, and also the snowman has a bunch of holly and berries on his hat. I didn't do that, but I don't think it takes too much away from this piece. I think it turned out really cute. And if you didn't know that, you would never think anything about it. It looks finished and it's ready to go. So putting this on the front cover, I did mount it a little bit to the left side rather than being in the center. And that's because when I made my first journal, I realized I need quite a bit of room for the clasp on the front of the cover. So I don't want to cover up the artwork. So hence I moved everything over to the left a little bit. Now here's the paper I'm going to use for the clasp and the strap. At this point I'm going to take out my little Sunlit desktop die cutter. This has a 3-inch throat in it, and I find that it works for so many things. There's a lot of dies out there that I use that are less than 3 inches wide. Like this is a perfect example of it. It's just quicker and easier to pull out that little one than deal with the bigger plates of the Big Shot for such a small die. Now I have to say that the dies really are great quality. They make great cuts. There's a lot of little diamond shapes in the strap, and those little intricate pieces just fell right out of the cardstock because the die cut it so well. I really barely had to poke at it to get those all the little diamonds out. There was just a few that hung in there, as you can see. But the strap is really pretty because of that extra little pattern in there of those diamonds. It's a nice touch. All right, so we're getting a little closer here so you can see this. There are 2 score lines in the strap. There's one on each end. And this is made, of course, perfectly to go around the completed journal. It's not too big, not too small. It's just right. Now this is the clasp. And I'm going to take my little craft scissors and I'm going to put it under the biggest part of the clasp opening to kind of stretch it out and more or less train it to stand up a little bit from the rest of the clasp. And that's going to make it easier to put the strap in. All right, so now I can glue this onto the journal. And this is exactly again why I waited to put the clasp on, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't completely cover up the clasp with the artwork. So if I had put it on first and then the artwork, I would have covered most of that up, as you can see. And the clasp is very decorative and it adds something for sure to the journal front. So I'm just going to use one. Now Bonnie's journal uses two. I think that's a great idea. I just wanted to only have one, so that's what I did. It seems to be great. It's holding the journal shut so far. Now when it's loaded, we'll find out. I'm trying this as I go, like many of you would be. Hopefully you can learn from either my mistake or learn from my experimenting of different techniques, maybe just slightly different from what Bonnie is demonstrating. So anyway, you'll want to make sure that the strap is straight in the clasp, and once you feel that's placed well, you can use your wet glue. Again, I would use wet glue. It's going to be your easiest choice here. And just fold it over and let it set. I just want to really stress that you want to make sure that the clasp and the strap are exactly even with each other. Otherwise, you're going to have problems with the left side and the right side of the journal kind of twisting a little bit and causing the top and bottom of the journal to not quite match. Now here's where I discovered that I had a problem because my clasp won't stay shut, and it's because I used the craft scissor a little too aggressively to open up the clasp part of it. So now my cardstock won't stay in there, but I have a solution that I'll show you. I added a little bit of bling here. This is snowflake bling from Eyelet Outlet. I thought it was the perfect little touch for it. And then I'm going to give it a spray or two of glitter dust from ThermoWeb. And I thought this would be nice to add. It just gives it a little bit of shine, a little bit of glitter, and it doesn't shed. Once it's dry, it doesn't move. So it just gives it a little bit of a wintry feel. It's kind of like using Wink of Stella across the whole piece of art. All right, so now I'm going to fix that strap and clasp closure. I decided to try Zig two-way glue. And it's two-way glue because if you let it dry without attaching it to another piece of paper, it will be removable. And so I just let it dry. Again, I'm going to show that to you. It's the Zig two-way glue. And now I can insert my strap through the clasp, press down just a little bit, and it will stick pretty well. Now you'll see it's going to pop apart pretty soon. There it went. So I decided actually to add a little more glue to it, basically a second layer, and that did seem to do the trick for me. The last thing I need to do for this cover is to cut a sentiment. So I took one of the sentiments from the new sentiment set, and it says Christmas cheer, and I'm going to run that through with this banner die. And I love how the center of the banner is open, so you can see exactly how your sentiment is going to show. It made it very easy to center it, both from side to side and top to bottom. Now this has score lines in it, and I'm going to show you how those fold. Basically fold it back, then forward on the one side, and the same way, back, then forward. And now you can fold it together and glue just a little bit on the bottom. It will allow the sentiment to pop up, give it some 3D appearance, and just be a very cute little message at the bottom of the journal. The other thing that's nice about this is that it will lay flat. So it doesn't have to be up and popped up all the time. If you're going to put it away, you can push that down when you're inserting it somewhere, and it will lay flat for you until you take it out. So as I stick that in, I'm just making sure that I can fold it flat. And again, using wet glue allows me the time to get that just right. So let me show you how this closes up. You start on the right page, the left page, right, then left, then right, then left, then the right side of the book and the left side of the book. And now it's ready to be shut with the clasp. So I'll just slip that in there. And I had added another layer of two-way glue, so it really does stick quite nicely now. That just seemed to do the trick. And there you have it. This is the book completed with the cover. I'll be back with the next 2 pages that we're going to do, and I'll continue that in this series until we have the whole book done. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed seeing this book come together and using Copics instead of watercolor, just another option. Take care, everyone. Have a great week and keep on crafting. Bye.